Have you ever thought about living without a car? Keep watching. What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to The World According to Briggs. Today we're looking at something that's been requested for a very long time. What are the most walkable cities in the United States? That is actually one of the top 10 things people Google when they're researching a city for relocation. Is it walkable? Or do you need a car to live there? I grew up in the Los Angeles area and just always assumed that when you were an adult, you needed a car. That's because Los Angeles and its suburbs are so spread out, if you want to go anywhere, you need a car. I mean, maybe if you're downtown LA, you might not need one, but everywhere else in that city and county, you need a car. When I moved to Portland, I noticed a lot of people I got to know didn't have cars and they didn't even want one. And that was really foreign to me. For the most part, it was the cost. That's what they all said. It's just too expensive with the insurance, gas, and everything else. In the last couple decades, it seems more and more people are starting to think that way. So a lot of people are interested in this, and a lot of different organizations have come up with a walkability score. And that score on different websites, both government and public, they kind of add it up differently. But most of the time they look at public transportation and population density. Even though public transportation is literally not walking, they are considering how far you have to walk to get to the public transportation to get wherever you're going. So that's what we're looking at today. Let's see what we found. Number 10, Arlington, Virginia. Arlington, Virginia starts off our list on the East Coast for a change. With over 60 neighborhoods making up this city across the Potomac from Washington, D.C., it's a good place not to have a car. Car insurance is pretty high here on average, so that's kind of rough. Densely clustered neighborhoods play a big part in the walkability of Arlington. Arlington is a beautiful city with a lot of things to do and very little crime. It is a great place to be walking around. Best parts to live in Arlington without a car would be Courthouse neighborhood, Virginia Square, and Colonial Village. Those are the top three, I'd say. There's always something to do in this city during non-pandemic days, I should say. There always seems to be a festival or some kind of event. Their walkability score out of 100 is 69.1. Number 9, Portland, Oregon. So when there aren't riots, this is a great city not to have a car. When they're having protests, riots, it sucks. They always seem to stop the trains and the buses, so it becomes a big nightmare. And you don't want to be wandering around any of that stuff unless you're actually there for that purpose. But if you're just trying to get back and forth to work and walk someplace, yeah, you don't need that. Hopefully it'll be over someday. Anyway, what makes this a good walkable city? A couple things. Number 1, Portland has one of the best public transportation systems in the country, and it really isn't that big of a city. Number 2, the city blocks are kind of small, and that's kind of nice. Probably the best places for walkability are the Pearl District, Goose Hollow, the Hawthorne District, and St. John's. Stay out of Chinatown and Northeast. You either have crime or you have crime and the homeless down in Chinatown. Really, everyone knows Portland has a homeless problem. In my experience, they usually don't mess with people too much unless you go to the wrong areas where there's a whole bunch of them. So just stay out of Chinatown and don't go to Northeast. The overall walkability score in Portland, Oregon is 65.4 out of 100. Number 8, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Minneapolis can get cold, so I'm sure the winter walkability score is much different from the summer walkability score. Most people don't know, but Minneapolis is a good-looking city. I've been there quite a few times. It's not a bad place to hang out. Their public transportation network is decent, with major expansions to the light rail system to be finished in 2030. At least that's the current plan. I always get people making comments like this. If something changes, they gotta leave comments. Oh, they scrubbed that idea. Well, look at the date of the upload, please, before you leave your comment. Municipalities sometimes abandon plans like that. So as far as the last update, it's all a go. The city's walkability score is 70.1 due to the pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods like Longfellow, Uptown, and Downtown. Over there, the University of Minnesota is pretty walkable too, but I mean, that's mostly college kids, so they're supposed to be there. You're not. If you're 50 and just hanging out drinking beer, you're not supposed to be there. It's college kids. Stay out of there. Go home. Number 7, Seattle. The Emerald City comes in at number 7. This made the list even though it's got a ton of hills. I go to Seattle all the time, and it's a workout for your legs. Seattle has areas that are densely populated, which helps their walkability score. And they've got a decent transit system, too, with a lot of expansions planned. The city's walkability score is 74, so that's solid. If you visit, don't rent a car for the day because the Space Needle, Pikes Place Market, Cruzport, and Pioneer Square are all, I would say, walkable or at least a quick trip on a bus or light rail. Seattle's a great town, but I will tell you right now, like Portland, when walking around, you have a good chance of seeing some weirdness. They have an overstock of very strange people in Seattle. I watched a man pull a sandwich out of the front of his pants. Not a pocket, like into his tighty whities, he pulled out a sandwich. Then he pulled out a Gatorade a minute later, and then a book. I'd seen enough at that point and moved on with my day. Number 6, Washington, D.C. With all the monuments and things to see, the District of Columbia sort of needs to be a walkable city. Washington, D.C.'s walkability score is 77.8. This again is a densely populated city and it has nice streets. The best neighborhoods for walkability are DuPont Circle, U Street, Penn Quarter, and my favorite, Foggy Bottom, which is just north of the Lincoln Memorial. Again, some areas have a fair amount of protesting these days, so keep that in mind. Everyone hates going 6 blocks out of their way to avoid a protest. Actually, I hate going 6 blocks out of my way for anything. Number 5, Chicago. Now, this one I totally agree with. I prefer walking in Chicago. I go there a lot. Before anyone says anything, I will say what I've been saying for years. Chicago isn't as bad as they make it out to be. If you watch the news, you'd think the place is a frickin' war zone. It's not. They do have some of the scariest neighborhoods in the country on the south side. The rest of the city is average or better than most cities when it comes to crime. Now, they always say it's the murder capital. Yes, they do have the most murders or close to the most murders every single year, but they also have about 5 times more people than the next city on the list usually. Chicago has a solid public transportation system and a lot of people are packed into a small area. That part sounds bad, but they make it work in Chicago. Chicago has a walking score of 78, and the city as a whole is a great place not to own a car. The best neighborhoods to live in if you're going to be without a car, I would say the near North Side, West Loop, Wrigleyville, and Old Town. They're among the most walkable neighborhoods. Number 4, Philadelphia. The city of brotherly love is a great city to walk around in if you're visiting or living there. You'll see a ton of people walking here, especially around the historical tourist locations. Make sure if you do go there and you're just visiting, see the Museum of the American Revolution, the Liberty Bell, Independence Hall, the Delaware River waterfront, and please have a Philly cheesesteak sandwich. You'll thank me later. Like all big cities, Philadelphia has some crime and some really bad neighborhoods. Most of the places you'll go are perfectly fine. Stay out of the bad neighborhoods and everything's great. Philadelphia has a good public transportation network and it's always in the top 10 cities in the US for public transportation. They got a light rail system and buses and all that good stuff. This is another great city not to own a car. They have a walkability score of 81. The most walkable neighborhoods are City Center West, Avenue of the Arts, and Rittenhouse Square. Number 3, Boston. For the better part of the past 3 decades, Bostonians have shied away from getting behind the wheel, opting instead to walk, bike, or take public transit. In 2015, Boston started doing some research on how to become a more walkable city. At the time, only about 15% of the residents walk to work. By 2030, they plan on having that number go up between 40 and 50%. Wherever the T, which is their local transit system, doesn't go, Boston residents will walk. It's not that far. Normally. Boston earned a walkability score of 81, making it the 3rd most walkable city in the country. The best walkable neighborhoods are the Leather District. Wow, they have one too? Hollywood, California has one also, but it's not good for walking. It's a kind of weird neighborhood. Anyway, Beacon Hill is good, the North End, and the Bay Village are great walkable neighborhoods. Number 2, San Francisco. Much like Seattle, they have far too many hills for anyone not in decent shape to be considered walkable. Last time I went to San Francisco, everywhere I walked, I smelt something burning. Turns out it was what was left of the cartilage in my knees. Fog City has buses, cable cars, and the Bay Area Rapid Transit System. This makes the city very friendly to people that want to walk. They also have what they call slow streets. This program opens up numerous corridors to pedestrians and cyclists. Some vehicles will be permitted to go through here, but there's a bunch of signs that are used to divert traffic, and they have really slow speeds on all of these different streets for the pedestrians and stuff. Any cars that can go down there have to go really slow. San Francisco comes in second with a walkability score of 86.9. The pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods are Chinatown, Union Square, and Lower Nob Hill. Now before we get to number 1, don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, and please feel free to subscribe and hit that little bell notification so you know when we upload it again. Alright, on to number 1. And number 1, New York City. The city that never sleeps, the Big Apple, Gotham, whatever you want to call it, this is a city you don't need a car to live and thrive in. New Yorkers walk everywhere. If they aren't walking, they have the subway, which they're famous for. The subway's going to drop you off less than a 5-minute walk from almost any place you need to be in Manhattan or most of New York. I watched a news article many years ago, like 60 Minutes or something. They asked a bunch of New Yorkers if they owned cars. Out of the 20 or so they asked, one said he owned a car. A few said they'd never even learned how to drive, and one man was easily in his 60s and said he'd never even learned how to drive a car, never been behind the wheel, said he didn't need it. Everything he needed was within walking distance. According to the U.S. Census, almost 80% of Manhattan residents don't own a car. They say the best neighborhoods for walking are Union Square, the West Village, and Soho. The overall score for walkability in New York City is 90. Solid. Yeah, if you ever look at any video or anything of New York City, everyone's walking. It's walking and cabs. That's about it. That's what it seems like, at least. Alright, that's today's video. I hope you guys got some information out of it. Hope you enjoyed it. That's the most important part. Enjoying the video. Everybody have a great day. Be nice to each other.